Rita and James, as always. Rita, Victoria grabbing the headlines. Queensland's doing its best. Queensland did a great job this week of completely making whatever of itself. I'll leave the expletives for others to fill in. Rita, talk us through Melbourne. Let's talk about Melbourne first.
Well, we've had more footage come to light overnight, this time from a Wallen checkpoint just outside of Melbourne. A woman, her name is Natalie, was stopped by police and then what looks like from the video forcibly removed from her car. Let's have a quick look.
Can you get out of the car, please?
No, I don't feel safe. You're armed.
You're safe. Don't you worry about that.
No, I don't feel safe. You're attempting to get into my vehicle. What are you doing? Why? Excuse me. You're not practicing. What the f doing? What the f doing? Hey, get off me!
Get out of the car.
Get off me!
She's got anxiety. Relax. Relax. She's sick. She's actually sick. Relax. Hey! Relax. Relax.
Well, don't you feel safer seeing that? I mean, if that's what Victoria Police think is community policing and how to handle the COVID restrictions, well, I think they've got a few questions to answer. I'm not going to form a complete judgment until we know the full story, but from what little we've seen on that vision, again, it just looks heavy-handed. It looks like police overreach, and it's terrorising law-abiding people needlessly.
It's absolutely terrorising. That's what it is. It's terrorism, pure and simple. That woman is terrified. We don't know the circumstances fully, as you said, Rita, but we've got our eyes in our head.
She claims they were upset because she had a phone charger on her mobile attached to the... I'm not exactly sure what the initial issue is, but it's apparently a checkpoint that she goes past regularly and hasn't had any issue until that. And that escalation is what worries me. Surely there's a better way to handle it than to immediately manhandle somebody. And apparently, according to her, a number of other officers then came in and also apprehended her, and she feels like she was treated unfairly and roughly.
Oh, disgustingly, James.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, look, a couple of points off of that. Number one, where are the de-escalation tactics in here? Why do the cops have to go from 0 to nuclear in 10 seconds, which is apparently what happened there? Number two, yes, we have to be careful. We don't know what happened in the lead up to that video. There apparently is another video which I have not seen, and we should wait to form a judgment until we see that. However, taking into account all of the cases we have seen in recent days and weeks, Katie Barnett, the law professor, who said she, as law professor, didn't feel comfortable arguing with the cops when they told her she couldn't stop when she was drinking a takeaway coffee on the street. All the different videos of people being monstered and abused, people having their doors kicked in because they liked a Facebook post. This is simply not Australian. This is not on. And in the leftist, most woke state in Australia, you would think, that this would be the sort of police overreach that they would condemn. And yet everybody says, oh, Dan, go harder, tell these terrible people, what they can do.
Well, this is so despicable.
It is. You mentioned the law professor because that's an important one, because that you've got someone who should be equipped to be able to defend herself.
I know her. She is not a crazy. I know her.
Oh,
yeah.
no. She is a very well-credentialed professional woman, respected, and knows the law, but she said she was scared in that situation, and she was also fearful for her mother who was with her because she was worried her mother was going to be saddled with a $1,652 fine. These fines are being handed out in Victoria like you would not believe. Victoria Police has handed out more fines than any other police force. Even before the second wave, they had handed out 10 times more fines than New South Wales. And these fines are crippling at a time where people can least afford them. And no wonder they're scared. No wonder that they don't want to argue back, even if they know legally they've got grounds to do so.
Well, the point is, a QC, Michael Wisely, I think his name is, has come out and said that Melbourne QC has said that he thinks the lockdowns are illegal, and this is the key point. There is no scientific justification from anywhere around the world for the extremity of these police measures. Nowhere. There is no medical reason for them. There's no scientific reason for them, and nowhere else in the world have these measures been shown to be effective in what they're trying to do. We now have the situation where we have a QC saying that he believes that Victoria's laws are illegal, and he's saying, not me, he's saying that the public should not have to obey them, that there is no reason...
Well, he's talking specifically about the curfews there,
yes,
isn't
the
he,
curfew,
Rowan?
absolutely.
The curfews, which are mandatory, 8 p.m. They're going to give us an extra hour shortly, though, so there'll be a 9 p.m. curfew. Yippee! But it's interesting because we were told this entire roadmap that was laid out by Dan Andrews last Sunday was all rooted in science. It was all based on the modelling.
Supercomputer, Rita.
But I tell you, the world-leading scientists who were part of that modelling have gone public to distance themselves from that very roadmap. It's astonishing. Both the Herald Sun and the Australian had stories with these leading scientists saying these measures are too stringent, that the modelling needs to be updated. In fact, the man who did the bulk of the modelling, he'd never had a meeting with the Victorian government in the lead up to the announcement last Sunday. I mean, what sort of a clown show are they running where they don't even sit down with the people who have done the modelling to see what the what it all means and what are the best scenarios and the inputs. The inputs apparently need to be updated already. I'm just astonished that this arrogant government, no matter how many stuff-ups it has, it maintains that its way is the only way. Every other way would lead to catastrophe.
Well,
so, James, apparently the good news is that pet groomers are back in business. Is the clown show that Rita refers to is really swinging into operation now?
We do know. I mean, this is scientific expert advice at its very best. Now, apparently, soon you will be able to go and get your Cocker Spaniel clippered when you are in Melbourne. So how wonderful for that. But here's the crazy thing. You can get your Cocker Spaniel clippered, but you can't get your lawn mowed. We had Jim Penman on last week who said that a whole of his people can't go out and mow lawns in people's, suburban yards where you don't have to meet anybody. And yet, if you take your dog to the groomer, you've got to take your dog and give it to the groomer and go to the groomer and get the thing back from the groomer. And that's much more human interaction. But apparently, I don't know, the expert panel is saying this, although maybe we need to check, do a little bit of investigative reporting. Does Dan Andrews have a poodle that's looking a bit scruffy? Are there Victorian cabinet members whose Burmese cats just need to have a good brush out? There seems to be so little rhyme or reason to this here.
Well, that's the problem. It's the lack of logic. You can't
versus another.
You can't
it's like the same thing with the curfew. Now the virus is going to stay out for one more hour, so we'll be safe until 9 p.m. because it's like vampires, and maybe if we have a steak and a cross and a silver bullet and garlic, we can ward this thing off.
There was, on a more serious note, one of the things is not only the lack of logic and the lack of consistency, but the lack of truth-telling. And we now have a suggestion on Friday, I think it was in the Age newspaper, Rita and James, that the 20-year-old corona victim, it was big news at the time, Dan Andrews, someone 20-year-old has got this virus. So, of course, everyone freaked out, didn't they, James? Now, it turns out it's a different story. We were not told the truth,
I mean,
possibly.
it's still a tragic story because, of course, every death matters, not just deaths from coronavirus. But back on August 14th, Dan Andrews got up and very solemnly said, we've had our youngest ever victim of coronavirus, in his 20s, blah, blah, blah. The idea being, and this was picked up by the whole lockdown Larry contingent across Australia, that this is not just a disease that hurts old people, but that anybody can be affected. Well, now it appears that there's a suggestion from those familiar with the investigation into it that that this may very well have not been a COVID-19 case, but rather a drug overdose. So that was used to scare people into thinking that this disease is of huge risk to people even in their 20s.
Rita, the World Health
that
Organization.
was deliberate. That
Absolutely.
scaremongering was so deliberate, saying this disease does not discriminate, when we know all the stats tell us that it does discriminate. It targets, it disproportionately harms people who are older or with pre-existing conditions. And yet we've got the Premier standing up there just trying to scare people. And now we've got the World Health Organization's latest data. Remember at the start of this pandemic, it was feared that the fatality rate was as much as 4%.
Yep.
Now, they're saying it's between 0.5 and 1%. So nowhere near as deadly as initially thought, which is good news. It's good news that you probably aren't reading much, but Financial Review carried it yesterday, which was fantastic. But that is something important that we've got to acknowledge, that what we now know about the virus is very different to what we thought back in late March, early April. And we have to adjust policies accordingly.